We've been scared that Penn State was going to come in and steal all of Iowa State's good players after Matt Campbell left, but I don't think that that's the case anymore. After this comment from inside the building, it doesn't sound like Penn State wants anything to do with Iowa State players.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now the number one sports podcast network. I'm your host, Nick Marovets. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Be sure to hit subscribe down below so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. As today, we break down comments coming in from the Penn State side of things in this ongoing saga. We're going to talk about why would Iowa State players want to go over to Penn State? Does Penn State even want Iowa State players? Transfer portal's coming up. We have to break that down. Then in the second segment, we're going to take a look at where should Jimmy Rogers focus on the transfer portal. I've got a few positions, but also a few conceptual ideas that I think would be very important for Iowa State in this crucial transfer portal that's coming up. And then finally, to round out today's show, Christian Rauh and I, a little Farmageddon Friday action, breaking down a lot of the tampering kind of situation going on. Obviously, Drinkwitz in Missouri made a big comment. So we break that down and honestly go into some crazy detail there. So don't go anywhere. You're going to want to see that. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. When it comes to the concept of Iowa State players going over to Penn State, this was immediately something that I think a lot of Iowa State fans were frightened about from the get-go, right? As soon as it was basically confirmed that Matt Campbell was leaving Iowa State, a lot of Iowa State fans, myself included for sure, I feel like we're very much, okay, well, now we just lost our entire team. And on some level, we did kind of lose our entire coaching staff, which we've talked about here at Locked On Cyclones. And I would say that there's a silver lining there, right? There is some positive in the fact that Jimmy Rogers can kind of get comfortable in Ames and use the coaching staff that he trusts. And I wouldn't be too down. Like, there are definitely downsides to losing a lot of the guys that Iowa State lost, but there are also upsides, right? We have to trust Jimmy Rogers and move on. But that's the coaching side of things. When it gets to the players, the transfer portal is coming up. Looks like it's going to be the beginning of January. And we've kind of gone back and forth. Like, okay, all of these guys are gone. And then, well, actually, they might be staying. And then something else comes out and, I kind of think they're gone. And then something else comes out and we're like, maybe they're all going to stay. It's a huge guessing game right now, which I completely understand. But after this latest piece of information, not only do I think Penn State might not want anything to do with Iowa State players, but also Iowa State players I don't think are going to want to go over to Penn State after this, to be completely honest. Now, before I get to this quote, I just want to lay out conceptually why Penn State wouldn't want Iowa State players and why they would want Iowa State players. Well, for one, the concept is that Iowa State players would follow Matt Campbell to Penn State. That's pretty standard as far as why a player would want to transfer over into the Big Ten, over into the Nittany Lions, over to State, over to State College, if you will. Right? They know their coach. They know what their coach is capable of getting out of them. And honestly, with the amount of position coaches that Matt Campbell took over, they're going to feel very comfortable with the guys that they know up until this point in their career, right? Whether they've been at Iowa State 1, 2, 3 years, whatever it is, there is an element of like, that's the guy who I feel like has gotten the most out of me, whether it's Matt Campbell or if it's a position coach. There are going to be guys that want to transfer, due to just prestige, if they feel like they have a better chance at winning a title, either national or conference over in the Big Ten for Penn State. Like, those are kind of conversations that are being had as far as why a player would want to leave Iowa State to go to Penn State explicitly. Obviously, there's tons of places players can go to leave Iowa State. There's 130 something. But as far as following Matt Campbell, that's the main reason, is the coaching. Obviously, you have that existing relationship. Maybe you wouldn't have been able to get to Penn State prior to this opportunity. So keep that in mind. Why would Penn State be uninterested in Iowa State players, though? Well, myself, Nick Marovets here speaking, I don't know if this is necessarily how I feel about it, but some people are assuming that, like, Iowa State's players just aren't on Penn State's level. There's just a talent disparity that cannot be overlooked. As bad as the players want to follow Matt Campbell over, it would be bad for Penn State as a program to accept all of I've seen comments talking about, like, well, what are we just now, the Penn State Cyclones? Like, we've got their entire coaching staff and all their players. Like, it's basically what the Texans are, but not on the NFL level, right? So that's the conversation. And up until this point, it's kind of all been like hearsay, basically, and what the fans are talking about. Like, why would Penn State want Iowa State players when we have access to so many more facilities and we can bring in better talent? Like, yeah, that's not fun to see, but at least it's just the fans saying it. Now I have new, not evidence per se, but a new quote to provide for you that I think is very important and very telling to this whole situation. So if you know an Iowa State player, I wouldn't hesitate to maybe show them this. I'm sure they've seen it, but just in case. Here, this is coming from King Mack, as far as having conversations with Iowa State staffers joining Penn State, excuse me. King Mack is a junior safety for the Nittany Lions. Number 16, he's 5'10", 187. We're throwing in there. He says, quote, I could just imagine the coaching that they did over there with not half of the talent that we have here. If they were able to be successful, that means there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to be with the talent that we have. So, obviously, the pacing is probably a little bit different there. It kind of messed up at the end of that quote, but the sentiment remains. Okay, I said all the words in the right order as far as I'm aware. What King Mack is saying here is basically what I think a lot of what he was getting at is Iowa State, these coaches coming over, like, we have a lot to be excited about. They could really propel this Penn State program into another level, yada, yada, yada. Look, this isn't Locked On Nittany Lions. The reason I'm talking about this is because of the comment he throws in here, just kind of, offhand, if you will. I could just imagine the coaching they did over there with not half the talent we have here. And then at the end, with the talent that we have. So there is now inside the building from an actual Nittany Lion player, the perception, and it's not really like a guess. We don't have to read between the lines. He said the words, Iowa State players are half as talented, or not even half as talented as Penn State players. And from, Penn State's perspective, I'm not arguing this. I wouldn't have said this publicly probably, but there is definitely an element of Penn State is able to bring in bigger recruits. This is not like a real point of contention. As far as I can tell, this is kind of everybody's understanding. But if you are an Iowa State player, do you really want to go over to, a new university, a new portion of this, nation, where before you're even on campus, one of your teammates has got this preconceived notion of, well, you're not even half as talented as I am, or as we are as a team. So I'm not really sure why you're here, but you're just not, you're from Iowa State. You're not as talented. Now, like I said earlier, there are certainly guys that are very talented on Iowa State's roster. I personally feel like that number is really high. And there are going to be guys that Matt Campbell is going to want on his squad. I'm not saying Rocco Becht will go over, but there is the conversation of, like Matt Campbell said, the trust between the quarterback and the head coach is very important. And Rocco, we know, is very talented. So there's going to be, like, if Rocco goes over, that would make sense, I feel like, for Penn State. But across the board, I feel like if you're an Iowa State player right now, you have to be like, well, I'm not going over there. If that's the kind of teammate I'm going to have, no, thank you. I just don't think that that's really the relationship that I want to have with my, especially on the defensive side of the ball. As good as Iowa State's been, apparently only half as good as what Penn State's has had defensively. Just worth keeping in mind here. Obviously, I don't know what the Iowa State players are going to do. I feel like they're very talented. I feel like Iowa State's in the best position they've been in a long time. But I guess, they don't feel the same way over there in Happy Valley. And I will be very curious to see how this plays out, if this is important in a few players' decisions to go over to Penn State. Now, anybody who leaves for Penn State, like, everybody has their reasons. But I saw this and I was like, I don't know how we can't talk about this. Coming from inside, this isn't just some burner on Twitter, somebody who's just talking about, like, well, I've been a Penn State fan since 1984, and I've never seen them have a lower talent level than Iowa State. Like, what? Like, okay, who cares? It's just some guy. This is the guy on the team. I feel like this is worth noting. I don't think Iowa State players are going to want to walk into that building if that's the general consensus. And that does make me feel a little bit better with this whole back and forth that we've had up until the transfer portal opening. Speaking of the transfer portal opening, Iowa State's going to have to make some big moves, I feel like. So I'm going to lay out kind of what I'm expecting from Jimmy Rogers, what position groups, conceptually, how he, I think, should attack the transfer portal. And we'll do that coming up right here after this. But first, a word from our friends over at Wayfair. The holidays always show up faster than we expect. And if you're still putting together gifts, last-minute decor, or getting your home ready for guests, Wayfair has you covered. Whether you need a quick room refresh, new bedding, or those final seasonal touches, Wayfair makes it easy to get what you need and fast. Wayfair is truly your one-stop shop for everything home, with decor, furniture, kitchen essentials, and gifts for every style and every budget, all delivered quickly and easily. Their selection is huge. Bedding, decor, kitchen gear, kids' room, updates. I was able to find everything all in one place. And the best part, there is no massive delivery fees. No stress. It's the best way to get your home holiday ready without running into different stores. So get last-minute hosting essentials, gifts for all your loved ones, and decor to celebrate the holidays for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop for all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. If this upcoming weekend of NFL games is anything like the Thursday night game we saw last night, my goodness, are we in for a treat. And the live betting is the best when the game starts to shift, just as it did last night. A receiver gets hot, defense tightens up, momentum flips after a turnover. Talk about momentum flip from the Rams to the Seahawks. Player props updating as guys heat up, live spreads and money lines adjusting instantly. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. This transfer portal for Iowa State is going to be absolutely massive, like a must-win situation for the Cyclones. And we're talking about here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I did kind of lay out a little bit of a thought process I've got here. I'm sure that Jimmy Rogers is tuning into every single episode, just as you are, and I greatly appreciate that. I kind of wanted to give him some tips, some pointers, if you will, what I think Iowa State needs to really attack. But before we get into all that, I just wanted to thank you guys for making Locked On Cyclones your first listen every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. You get access to ad-free audio feed for the Locked On Cyclones, obviously compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcasting app. Just head to the show notes below to learn more. Really cool opportunity. All right, let's dive into this transfer portal kind of concepts and players and position groups and all that. I've got it all laid out here. The first kind of how I'm looking at this is the transfer portal is a very good opportunity for a team, a coach, to make an impact right now. When you bring in players from the high school level, unless it's like Killian Torre, you generally have to wait a few years for them to make a significant impact. Now, of course, there's going to be freshmen who step in. There's going to be guys who step up early. But just across the board, generally speaking, freshmen don't make as much of an impact as upperclassmen. They need a little bit more time to develop. And that's where the transfer portal can come in clutch. This is where you can impact winning right now is the other point that I have here. You can, evaluate what you're looking at as far as your roster goes, fill holes or potentially bolster, depth at certain positions and win right now. Make huge jumps as far as what the team is capable of in a month, right? And you really don't see that a whole lot of other times throughout the year. Maybe the transfer portal, or not the transfer portal, excuse me, maybe on signing day, but those are all going to be freshmen or, JUCO guys. Like Iowa State had one JUCO player. Like there is that as well. But I think for the most part, the transfer portal is really what that is for. As far as position groups, the first thing that I think Jimmy Rogers needs to worry about, now this might not necessarily be true of every team because not every team's going to have the same amount of turnover, but Jimmy Rogers needs to focus on where there are losses. Where is there going to be a thinning out as far as the roster depth, and where can he bolster that back up, because we know depth is very important here at Iowa State, obviously after the last 2 years. The first position that I circled as far as kind of getting thin right now is the cornerback safety situation. Already Kyjon Cummings-Coleman, Josh Patterson, Quentin Taylor Jr. in the portal. Is that everybody? No. I don't know exactly who is going to be jumping in the portal with just the amount of coach movement. We'll see. All right. It's going to take time. And as we get closer, maybe I'll be able to put a better read on it. But as of right now, what we have to work on is these guys are in the portal. And I think it's important for Iowa State to prioritize the cornerback position. Trey Bell was a massive acquisition last season, probably one of the biggest in the transfer portal. Obviously, Chase Sowell, very big as well. Xavier Townsend, like those guys were huge. But Trey Bell was a name that I circled right away. I hope he sticks around. I think he's got a lot of potential at Iowa State. But if we can bring in just a few more guys like that, I think that Iowa State has a really good chance at excelling and keeping that cornerback safety pass defense completely relevant. I did have this other note on here that I really wanted to bring up. It's related to the fact that positions that we bring in can make an impact now and impact winning. ISU might not be, Ohio State, LSU, or Bama, but the landscape has cooled off a bit in the last year or so. And I remember why I wrote that down. I think that's a really good point. There's going to be a conversation of how well can Iowa State compete for guys that are going to make an impact right now, for guys that are going to improve chances of winning week one. And I'll get back to the positions in just a second, but I really want to make this point. Remember when Joshua Jefferson and like Deshaun Jackson were kind of on the chopping block and they might leave after last season, and then Deshaun Jackson went out to Pitt for $1.5 million, and there was a lot of conversation of like, that's a lot. That's a big payday, maybe more than some were expecting, some for sure. And remember, the reason for that was because that was right before rev share went into effect. And I'm not saying that there aren't levels to it now, because there certainly are, but I think it's all calmed down a bit. There was so much money being thrown around in that basketball transfer portal because collectives were kind of basically going away, and they had to find a way to use that money. They were like, hey, we've got kind of like $3 million sitting around. You have 3 basketball players you want to pay? Because if they're in the portal, we'll pay it. Like, we got to get rid of this money. We've got to make an impact while we still can. That's not the case anymore. Now, of course, there is, the overhead stuff that we've talked about. There's, like Jamie Pollard's talked about, there is the rev share, and then there is the basically ability for businesses to pay athletes directly. And it's a tricky spot for Iowa State to be in. But I think the landscape has cooled down quite a bit, where now you don't have to compete with a school who's going to offer a Deshaun Jackson $1.5 million. And Iowa State's like, oh, we can't compete with that. We're not going to pay you $1.5 million. Now, of course, that number is reported. I don't have that in writing that that's the case, but that at least conceptually, I don't think Iowa State has to compete quite as hard. And you're not going to bring home, 5-star talent at every position group this season, especially for Iowa State. But I think you have a better chance at bringing in, more impactful guys than maybe last year or the year prior. Now, other position groups that I think are very important for Iowa State to go ahead and target. I do think grabbing a couple young guys from lower ranks is going to be huge, allowing them to develop. We've seen that a little bit. It can go the other way, not just a win now situation. I think quarterback is probably a spot where Iowa State could grab a guy or two, maybe. I think that, the loss of the 2026 quarterback is going to be, his case is going to be not ideal. That was a huge get. I honestly thought that would be a huge win for Iowa State prior to everything that went down. So I wouldn't hate bringing in a quarterback that we've seen some success at the college level. Wide receiver, I think, is probably an area where some depth would be good. I'll be very interested to see, with Noah Pauley leaving, what the room looks like. As of right now, I'm guessing it's not going to be ideal. I think we can retain a few key guys, but I think you're going to have to bring in some talent. As I said, the safeties position. I also think defensive line is an area where Iowa State can hit a home run. They don't have to, right? I don't think that's an area where it's necessary. Honestly, to be completely frank, I don't think there's an area on this roster that needs a transfer portal addition. Super, like if we don't get it, we're cooked type of situation. It's also partially because I'm just not sure who's leaving yet. But I think that the defensive line would be an area now, with obviously Dom Orange going into the draft. Like, that's the biggest name, and we'll see what it looks like in a few weeks. That's an area where Iowa State, I think, needs to probably prioritize the portal. So I would say the corner position, probably picking up a college quarterback is smart as well. Not necessarily to contend with Rocco Becht, and maybe you don't do that just to keep Rocco Becht from feeling like leaving is a smart play. I think keeping Rocco Becht this year is a very smart move. And if that's going to be a point of contention, then don't do that. But having a guy that's able to develop, I think would be smart as well. And then wide receiver, probably a smart play. I don't think you need to go to running back yet. I think you can leave that alone. I think you can probably leave a portion of the offensive line alone. You might want to bring in a few guys, but nothing too crazy. I do expect this to be a pretty busy portal for Iowa State and Jimmy Rogers. This is an opportunity for them to make a splash and get a big win. So I don't know exactly where they're going to go. I don't know what the team is going to look like, but that's kind of my guess right now. I'm curious what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. What would you target if you were Jimmy Rogers and the transfer portal was coming up? Because right now, I can guarantee you he's got moves he's got to make. And I can almost guarantee you every Iowa State player is getting calls from all across the nation. Is it tampering? Is it not? Christian and I are going to break that down coming up right here after this. But first, a word from our friends over at Rocket Money. Ever feel like your money just disappears each month? It happens fast. A few subscriptions here, an impulse buy there, and suddenly the numbers in your bank account don't match the numbers in your head. And suddenly, Rocket Money is there to help you get clarity, track every dollar, and stay in control of your finances, because managing your money shouldn't feel like a second job. Rocket Money does the heavy lifting for you so you can save more and stress less. I like how Rocket Money automatically builds budgets based on past spending. It keeps you on track without having to really overthink it. The bill alerts and spending notifications help you catch small things before they turn into big expenses. Having the app find good times to save each month keeps you consistent, with your financial goals. Take control of your finances and cancel your unwanted subscriptions with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon.
College athletics have another problem, and go figure. The NCAA having problems, well, that is something that once again is happening. Farmageddon Friday here. Nick Marovets of Locked On Cyclones joining me for this final segment of your Friday, because I needed some help to try to get this figured out, because obviously there is crazy things happening right now. You ever heard of Kelshi? Have you ever heard of something like that? It's a predictive model for everything. I mean, you can basically determine, like, will the price of milk go up? Will somebody be heads or tails? What's the color of the Gatorade that this random person is going to pick up at the gas station? I don't know. There's a lot of things that happen with Kelshi. I haven't really dug into it too much. I've just seen a lot of ads for it. But the reason I bring it up is now that they are determining that Kelshi is going to start making sports predictive markets on players deciding or entering the transfer portal. That is an absolute, to me, a red flag. I think it's such a red flag for college athletics. They need to keep college athletics out their mouth. Cue the Will Smith movement. Like, keep college athletics out your mouth. Like, absolutely. Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, went out and said, completely opposed this. I'm not really in favor of Charlie Baker and what he's done for the NCAA. Not a really big fan of the institution itself. But I think he hit this statement spot on. And Nick, what he said was basically that it was already, they oppose college sports marketing. They're already bad enough for student athletes that face harassment, abuse, but lost bets on game performance. And now Kelshi calls them out directly, wants to offer bets on their transfer decision and status. What's your overall take for this? This is wild to me.
Yeah, this is not great. Obviously, with the whole betting situation Iowa State's been through, there's going to be an element of like that comes into my answer here. It does feel like a little bit of a product of the system, because you talk about culture a little bit. I don't know much about it either. I just know that, like, you can literally bet on, like, the weather, and that's like one of their main points on their ads and stuff. And so I'm not really sure what it is, but I don't think it's great that we can bet on, or are we even betting, or whatever it is. There seems to be some sort of money involved on whether kids are going to the transfer portal, and if they are, where they're going, at least to my understanding. I don't think that's good at all, because there's already a ton of posts and messaging going on, trying to keep players around. I know for Iowa State especially, we're at risk of losing a ton of players. And so there's a lot of that online right now. And those the student athletes, are feeling that. They're already kind of overwhelmed by that. And now you introduce the possibility for, quote unquote insider trading. You got a buddy who's like, hey, were you entering the transfer portal? Can you hold off on that a little bit so we can push up this line? Like that already, like that's bad in and of itself. So no, I'm not a huge fan of this at all. I do think that on some level, this is a product of the system, but that is, you have to draw the line somewhere. And it's like, I get what the program is trying to do, what they're trying to capitalize on. But if you're the NCAA, you have to find a way to shut this down, because the integrity of everything, not just the game, but of everything, will start to go out the window.
Yeah, for full context, I'm not against sports betting. I'm not against sports gambling. I think that it's obviously what it's done for the game. It's helped bring in a lot of money into the program, and it's definitely changed the way, good or bad, wherever you want to decide on, it's definitely changed the product on the field. What I don't like is these prop things where you're basically trying to decide the future of something that can obviously be manipulated here. Where you mentioned it, we're in speculation season. I've been telling my listeners every day when we talk about this, we're in speculation season right now. Will this player go? Will he stay? I mean, Avery Johnson is the perfect player that I continue to talk about, especially with Jace Brown leaving in the transfer portal. His best friend, his wide receiver one, Avery Johnson's been radio silent. All we can go off is basically some cryptic tweets here and there from other sources. Imagine if you put in a couple cryptic tweets that just made it sound like, oh, he's staying. He's not going anywhere. He's staying right here. And then all of a sudden those numbers start rising up saying he's not going anywhere. And then you do an insider trade with somebody. Somebody steps up and says, hey, man, let's just push this a little longer. Transfer portal is open till the 16th. On the 14th, let's just ride this baby till it goes as high as we can, and then we'll throw all our eggs in one basket, hit the portal, and we'll be rich. That's a completely different way to make NIL. Of course, it's an illegal way, but that's a completely different way to do it. You can't tell me that if this happens, at least one player won't try that.
Yeah, and the way that I look at this is like the gambling situation is, I feel like for Iowa State especially, is very different from this. It's really not that connected at all. I view this more as like, this is external pressure that's just completely unnecessary. Like gambling on games, I don't think is even in the same realm. To me, this feels like an entirely different entity, and something that's just not really good for the game. Like when you see something and you can ask yourself, like, is this good for the game or is this bad for the game? This to me feels like I'm definitely not putting it in good for the game, so I'm okay with putting it in the bad for the game category.
Charlie Baker continues with his quote and says, this is absolutely unacceptable and would place even greater pressure on student athletes while threatening competition integrity and recruiting processes. Their decision and future should not be gambled with, especially in an unregulated marketplace that does not follow any rules of legitimate sports betting operators. So it sounds like it's more against Kelce, not against sports betting in general, because it's a completely different type of market, the sports prediction market. And he mentioned recruiting processes here. It does sound like they're not stopping with the transfer portal. Could this be with high school kids? Like, for example, 2026 class, maybe they they hear some rumblings of somebody flipping. They get the news before somebody else does, and they move the markets in the different direction, or, whatever that case may be. And they throw a couple bucks to a player. I have no problem with players getting money. Obviously, you want to make sure you do it in the right processes. And this does, to me, seems like a lot of sketchy red flags, in my opinion. This screams tampering, Nick.
Yeah, it does. And we should get to that. We should talk about the tampering, because this, I feel like, is so real right now. What do you have on the tampering front for me?
Yeah, Eli Drinkwitz, head coach of Missouri, said college football is sick right now and says that there's signs that the sport is cracking. Quote, he says, tampering is at the highest levels. There is no such thing as tampering. Wait a minute, what? He said there are no such thing as tampering because there's no one that's been punished for tampering. I think an absolute bombshell right here from Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach of Mizzou. Everyone on my roster is being called. Now, first thing, if a head coach from the SEC is complaining about tampering, that's kind of ironic, because, he's probably making phone calls too, but he's also going out there probably because he's not ahead of the game. He's probably not ahead of Georgia, Alabama, some of those other ones, but it's still a problem. The fact that he's willing to step up to the podium, even though he's probably doing the exact same thing, but at the same time, if you can't beat him, join him. In this world of right now, if it's not being regulated, you have to step up and do this. I mean, we're looking at the revenue sharing, the $20.5 million. So many different teams are going above that because it's not being regulated. And if you're not doing it, somebody else is going to do it. So you might as well do it right now. In the eyes of tampering, though, This Kelce thing is a thing that really makes me nervous. And then everything in general, when it comes to the transfer portal, people are getting called in the middle of the season. We saw it happen at Kansas State. I'm sure you saw it happen at Iowa State. It's happening all over the place.
Yeah, that's the thing is if an SEC head coach is complaining about it, what do you think the Big 12 is going through? Like this is not super new news to anybody who's a fan of any Big 12 team, maybe other than Texas Tech. Like I don't know if they're a big enough power yet to really feel the effects of this, but like a Kansas State and Iowa State, I think we can both agree that there is it's definitely viewed as almost a farm, right? Like these players are going to come in. Iowa State, Kansas State going to find those 3 stars, develop them, and then boom, Ohio State, like, yeah, we want that guy on our roster. Like, I do think there is an element of that here that we are used to. And I think that Drinkwitz makes a really good point here. Like, there just literally is no such thing as tampering, because if you're not going to prevent it by punishing it, like, then why is it even a term if it's not punishable? I think it's probably bad for the sport. I don't think it's as bad as the Kelce stuff we were talking about earlier, but I do think this kind of needs to get reined in a little bit. There needs to be some. This is the problem with, like, when you compare the college football landscape to the NFL, and we've done that so much because college football has started to become more and more and more semi-pro, which is not a good thing in my opinion. But when you make that comparison, this stands out like above the rest, and I think it needs to be fixed pretty quickly, especially if it's being pointed out by SEC coaches. Then now you know it's bad.
Yeah, when the SEC starts talking about things that obviously that those conferences have been doing for a very long time, and now that they don't have the competitive advantage, now they finally are going to speak up. It's a problem because everybody is doing it for sure. Insane
Quick
stuff,
question
Nick.
for you.
Bring it. Send it.
Do you think that Drinkwitz is bringing this up because he feels like he's losing, he's lost the edge, or do you think he's bringing this up for the true love of the game? College football is in fact cracking, because I think college football as we know it is completely out the window. We're looking at a whole new sport. It's only getting crazier every single day. I think that's true. But do you think that's really why he's bringing this up, or do you think he's bringing it up to try to level the playing field to a point where he can be competitive yet again?
My heart wants to say he's doing it for the right reasons, because Eli Drinkwitz seems like one of the good guys. He didn't take any of the head coaching searches anywhere else. He stayed with Mizzou. He got a contract extension. Obviously, Mizzou's not known as one of the biggest names in the SEC, and his name was circulating all over the place. However, we are talking about a world right now where it's adapt or die and everything with this unregulated wild, wild west of markets. You have to think the reason he's stepping up, maybe it's a little bit of frustration because of just your overall love for the game, but there's probably more to it. It's probably it's something fresh in his mind. He probably did lose somebody to tampering. His roster, as he said, he ended this quote saying, quote, "Everyone on my roster is being called." When your quarterback, his quarterback entered the portal, and what's his name? Bo Prebula, when he entered the portal.
Prebula.
Yeah, Prebula. Sorry. I mean, that's something right there, that he's willing to step up and say, hey, look, there's a problem right here. So as much as I'd like to say, I think it's, him trying to say it's for the good of the game, it's probably because he got.
Oh yeah. I think that's probably, I think we're in the exact same boat. Actually, I wish it was for the good of the game. I think that there needs to be more coaches out there like that, but more than likely he just lost a few players and a little upset about it.
Kelce has some cool up and down things. I've been looking at this while we've been talking, yes or no. One thing they don't have, because it's the question. It's like, will something happen? Will it not happen? That's basically their predictive markets. One thing they don't have is, will Jimmy Rogers say the F-bomb at a Cyhawk game? I wonder if that's going to be on there maybe sooner than later.
Oh, man. Jimmy Rogers really came out swinging, and I think Cyclone fans are ready to back him. So, hey, Kansas State fans out there, keep your head on a swivel. This Farmageddon is not going to become some close matchup. It's going to stay one-sided.
We'll see about that. We'll see about that in Manhattan this week. This season, it'll be good. Let's get on out of here. Thank you so much for listening, either to Locked On Cyclones or Locked On Kansas State. Wherever you're listening, we'll see you back here next time. Take care. That game's in Manhattan this year. Rodgers is going to go 0-1 to start off his season.
I don't think Rodgers is scared, man. I don't think he's scared.